Hi everyone, my name is Mark Wilson and I'm an author illustrator, and in this little session I thought I'd tell you something about the research I do for each book. It's massive because my books are historical fiction, meaning they're a story I've semi-made up, but they're based on real people, real events, real places. Eureka, A Story of the Goldfields, is exactly one of those stories. It's a story about a young girl, Catherine Martin, that's the real person, and Pan Ah Shin, a Chinese boy, who at the tender age of 16 immigrated on his own from China, from mainland China, which was torn apart by civil war and horrible things happening. And he came out here to make a new life for himself, just as basically as a teenager. And he met Catherine Martin, and you'll have to read the story to find out what happened to them. Sorry. Research. This is what I do. I love research. I read everything I can about the goldfields, about the people, what they wore, how they made their tents, what their wagons looked like, just about everything, what the soldiers looked like, and I use lots and lots of books. I found this absolutely beautiful. It's called Eureka's Women by Dorothy Wickham, and yeah, that's a great book. That's a great book, and in it you've got all sorts of things about what the sort of clothes they wore, what men wore, women wore, what soldiers wore, children, what children wore even. And you need to be absolutely accurate when you're illustrating and writing, for that matter, a book that's based in history. You really have to get it right, or you get a lot of strange, I won't say nasty, some strange emails pointing out where you've gone wrong. In my whole career, over 36 picture books, I've had one such email. So I consider myself pretty lucky. And you can see that probably I'll read, research, look at books, look on the internet. I went to Sovereign Hill. I saw these places. I took massive amount of photos, 276 photos, 3 of which I probably used, but I need all that stuff around me to get me into that situation of what it was like to be there at Sovereign Hill in Ballarat. So that's the research, and then visually it's very interesting because I'll show you. On the opening page there is a locket, and the locket is the little keystone to the story. So you've got this little picture of a locket here. So I don't just make up a picture. I go and find a locket that inspires me to actually illustrate. And I found this beauty. It's just a little locket like that. Look, I don't know if it comes up on the screen, but it's a beautiful little locket. It's gold, and it opens up. So it's got, you can put 2 little pictures in it, like that. So it opens up. I can't open it, it's all rusted up. It's very old. And I use that, so I'll paint that, okay? And then I'll paint my little characters in it. And then on a page, like where you've got, say, a lot of gold, or a piece of gold, like that one, that our heroine in the story finds, I actually go and find, and I actually bought this. This is a little pieces of gold. So I know what they look like, the luster, the effect, that sort of thing. And to me it's important to get all these tiny little details right. And I've said many times to many people, the detail is what people notice when they're reading a story. It's the tiny little things, a little gold locket, a piece of gold, a ribbon, something like that. These are all the things that make a story for me. And you can see in this picture here, they're weighing the gold, and you can see here, you can see our hero here standing behind the heroine and her father, because the Chinese weren't allowed into the gold buying hut in the accounts I've read. Well, in two actual accounts I've read. So the Chinese were treated quite badly, and I wanted to point that out by showing these situations where, oh yeah, the Chinese man has to stand at the back of the tent, or behind it, or come in the back way, or something like that. So all these little things, and as I've said before, I look in my research, I look for these things where people are bullied or downtrodden, and then I can show how the other side of our history. We tend to glorify the gold rush and the first fleet and all these sorts of events that have happened in Australian history, but if you were back there and you were in a prison cell on a ship and you were drinking water that was full of horrible stuff, and dry stale bread that had mould on it for 7 months, and you were kept in the dark like some of the convicts were, it probably wouldn't have been a pleasant thing back then when you were experiencing it. And we look back on these things with a sort of nostalgia, but that nostalgia has to be brought to life, and I sort of try to do that in my books. Yes, so once I've got lots of these photographs, what I do then is I try to interpret these photographs in the clothes they wore, and often in the events that happened in the book. So you've got this massive fire when after the rebellion, after the fighting, and some soldiers were killed, and some miners were killed too. The soldiers went and set fire to the tents that the diggers and their families were living in, and everybody ran in panic, but the soldiers set fire to them. And in that scene I've tried to show a similar thing. So you've got this massive fire that was the burning down of the hotel in the first place, but I've used that as inspiration for when the soldiers set fire to some of the tents. And our heroine is running and trying to find Chen, and trying to find her father after the battle and in the chaos of the soldiers hunting people down. So you can see there's a lot of research goes into these stories, and you have to have a fair knowledge of what the soldiers wore, what the people wore, so that you can be absolutely accurate. How they wore their hats. The hats would have been old and beaten by the sun and the dirt and the weather and all that sort of thing. And then you have the soldiers in your massive battle scene like that, and they're only tiny little figures, and people say, oh, it doesn't really matter, but you have to get every little cross on their the white cross on their chest, the little insignia on the top of their hat, and you have to do that by 30-40 times. The fence that the soldiers had to get over were sharpened stakes, and they were put in a crisscross pattern. And I found that by looking, there's a photograph, a massive photograph that's beautiful. But I'll see if I can find it for you, because it's really important. And these sort of things are what you look for. See, that would have been impossible for the soldiers to get across, which is very clever, because the miners didn't have much to use, so they thought, oh, we'll build this pretty solid, very sharp wall, and the soldiers had to get over it. So I use all these things as reference to make sure historically my paintings are correct. And then when I've got all these photos together, I do lots of photographs of I do lots of drawings from the photographs of what the people wore, what was happening, what the officials wore, what sort of hats. And officials in those days always had big flowery hats and things to show, oh, they're important. Oh yes, don't mess with me, I'm the mayor or something like that. So, or head of police. So you can see lots of books. This one I actually bought at Sovereign Hill. It's an official souvenir program, Blood on the Southern Cross, and I found that very late into my research, but gee, it's invaluable. So I hope this this little session has helped you understand how much work I do. There is a massive amount of reading too. I won't go without saying I read complete books like that on the whole history of the area, the people, and I take it all in. I take in as much writing as I do photographs and books with reference maps and all sorts of things in them. And thank you for listening, if you still are. I know I can prattle on a bit, but hope you enjoyed that. Eureka, A Story of the Goldfields, a lot of research, and that's similar for all my other books too. Okay, cheers and bye for now.